The opinions expressed in the video you are about to see are solely those of BoatTEST.com and its test captain.
Hi, I'm Steve for BoatTEST.com, and today we'll be taking a look at the features and performance capabilities of the Evinrude E-TEC 150 two-stroke outboard engine. To test our E-TEC 150, we selected a typical application for this engine, in this case, a 25-foot pontoon boat with triple tubes and a test weight of just over 4,000 pounds. With a 14 3/4 inch by 16 inch 3-bladed prop, top speed was reached at 5350 RPM and 37.2 miles an hour. At that speed, we were burning 15.7 gallons per hour and getting 2.37 miles per gallon. Best cruise came in at 2500 RPM and 13.4 miles per hour, where we had a 2.8 gallon per hour fuel burn. Our time to plane was 4.9 seconds and we reached 20 miles an hour in 5.2 seconds and 30 miles an hour in 7.7 seconds. While operating this pontoon boat, I found very smooth power inputs with no fluctuation throughout the RPM range. Now, while we did bleed off speed in hard turns, the engine did not, and in fact, by adding power in the turns, I was able to maintain our speed regardless of how hard I was turning the boat. And as smooth as the power response was to these controls, these were actually mechanical controls, and by substituting the electronic icon controls, believe it or not, your operation will be even smoother. Something to know from my test is reduced noise when shifting into gear. It just seems smoother and quieter. That's our look at the performance capabilities. Now let's take a look at some of the key components of this engine. For starters, right behind the air intake is the main oil distribution manifold. These blue hoses deliver oil to each of the cylinders in precise amounts. Attached to the side of the manifold is a switch that senses each pulse of the oil to be sure that those precise amounts are indeed being sent, and it can sense the difference between air and oil. One of the reasons oil lasts so long in E-TECs is because they capture and reuse existing oil. This check valve is part of the system that pumps oil from the bottom main bearing to the upper main bearing. The engine captures oil from the crankcase and reuses it and circulates it through the engine. Here is the electric starter that connects to the flywheel above. Evinrude equips the solenoid with an anti-stick feature that activates and deactivates the starter with a bang instead of easing it on and off. It's part of how they're able to get so many thousands of start hours out of the starter. Next door is the fuel filter water separator. It includes an integral water sensor. This is a key feature to an engine running on the E10 fuels that have a tendency to collect water. Right below is the fuel pump that supplies the vapor separator, where the high-pressure 30 psi pump takes over to send fuel to the injectors. Evinrude engineers these injectors so that fuel is stored between the nozzle and a check valve at shutdown so that you have easier cold starts. On the back side, we see the fuel inlet and outlet sockets. And this basically works like the speaker on your stereo to oscillate a coil to inject fuel in precise measurements. At idle, these actually inject about 5 cubic millimeters of fuel per shot, which is about the size of 2 champagne bubbles. That's key to how these engines keep running so economically. Let's pop off the inner shroud and see what lies beneath. Well, first up is the star of the show. This is the EMM. It's basically the brain of this computer-controlled engine. Technically, it's the integral ECU and power management system. It has a rectifier regulator that comes in from the stator just adjacent, so it creates the 55 volts that the whole system runs on, as well as the 12 volts that does the battery charging. In other words, it's a full onboard engine management system, as well as driving the ignition coil drivers and the fuel drivers. The whole engine control software integrated into one package. The EMM is also water-cooled. You can see the water inlet line and how it runs right through to the outlet side. The third hose is a back pressure relief. Here's your main fuse right next to a replacement that stores right next door. Now, one important note here is that this fuse is protecting the circuits that integrate with the boat, not the engine. This engine can continue running without any electrical components connected to it. In fact, if you could pull start the 150, you wouldn't even need a battery to operate this engine. That's a critical consideration when operating on the water with electronically controlled engines. So that's our look at the features and performance capabilities of Evinrude's E-TEC 150. For BoatTEST.com, I'm Captain Steve. We'll see you on the water.